Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about how to write and research federal grant applications. This is part of a larger series, and because of that, we're going to be spending more of our time on the research part and establishing how to keep track of and manage the process of applying, rather than focusing on the application texts themselves, because those are things that we've delved into in more depth in some of our previous webinars that you can watch. If you haven't done so already, please introduce yourself in the chat room. Let us know where you're joining us from geographically, what your interest is that brought you to this webinar today, and if you are working with or hoping or planning on working with a nonprofit of some sort, what the area of programming might be, because that will help us shape the examples so that they are more useful and relevant to you. Now, some people have shared some other examples here, and I see that we have several people who are running or working for nonprofits already, and some people who are planning on starting one, and I'd say awesome. Some things that you might be interested in knowing before we dive into the main context. The time that it takes to get a 501c3 application approved by the Internal Revenue Service. I remember waiting for 6 months for one that was filed in the middle of the pandemic. 2020 was not a great year for the mail getting processed on time. But in the last 6 months, when I've been helping people with their applications, they've been coming back in 3 to 5 weeks, which is a pretty good turnaround time. And if you are looking at most federal deadlines in the 2024 calendar year, you have a fair chance of eligibility if you put together your application now and sent it in. Some things that might be helpful to know about that, and we'll get into this later in more detail. You can always amend your articles of incorporation, your rules of order, and things like that after your organization has been approved. And you can always do things like expand your board of directors later. But to apply for almost all the things that we'll be looking at today, you either need to have a nonprofit or meet other specific eligibility criteria. Now, the definition of nonprofit usually does include things like a nonprofit school or a public education institution like a public high school or college or university, or a government entity in some cases, if it's a local or state government. But we'll talk about that more. So with no further ado, let me show you briefly that this is part of a larger series. So we have a general intro to grant writing webinar, one specifically focused on applying for fellowships, one about seeking out and applying for government funding, another for study, research, and teaching abroad, say if you were specifically wanting to do, say, a Fulbright Award or a Dodd Award to go and teach, research, or study in another country, and then one specifically about soliciting a letter of invitation. And letters of invitation or letters of cooperation are pieces of documentation that can really anchor and help round out an application, because the people that you're proposing to work with saying, oh, you would be awesome at this, or your organization would be awesome. We cannot do that thing, or we are not doing it well on its own. And that's why we are so excited to work with these people. Please give them the money. That is a really helpful thing for someone reading through a lot of grant applications. A solid letter does make a big difference. And some of the opportunities that we'll talk about soon will require that. Some won't, and some it'll be an optional thing. And when it's an optional thing, I always recommend going after the letter anyway, because although you don't need it, it helps your application stand out. If you just joined us, please do share in the chat room where you're joining us from and what your interest is in this webinar today, because this is a little bit more free form in where we spend our time. And if there's something that you'd really like to see, let your voice be known and we can do our best to accommodate that. So we're going to briefly be mapping what we do today into introducing the Grants.gov website, which is a central clearinghouse of sorts for federal grant listings and for many, but not all, the applications. We'll talk a little bit about how to track opportunities. and then a little bit about institutional access. And we might jump back and forth depending on the questions. So please, if you have a question, just go ahead and type it in the chat. If you'd rather ask it privately, you can use the chat tool, select my name from that blue drop down and send it to me privately. But the best questions are the ones that you ask, and the worst questions are the ones that you want the answers to, but don't ask. So please feel free to ask as we move along. Now, if you are in a particular institutional situation where you aren't running a nonprofit, but you're part of it, and you have a project you want the nonprofit to apply for, here's some things that might be useful to know. First, it is very common to have the official applicant of record to be an institution, and then you're working with that institution on the contractual presumption of they get this award, that the award specifies you will be paid X to do the programming, and that is something that when it goes in, that is a contractual proposal that is difficult to amend. But you might not be, say, a full-time faculty or a full-time staff of that institution, but the grant outlines, oh, if they get this money, you will be paid X to do Y. That's very common. And there are also a few cases involving universities where there are independent centers within the university. And there are specific rules about how that works. But for example, Boston University, my alma mater, has a literary magazine called Agni, AGNI, and that's entirely freestanding. They do share some office space with the English department, but other than that, they have their own board of directors, they have their own bank accounts and such. And so even though Agni is in some sense a sub-entity within Boston University, by the National Endowment for the Arts criteria, it is classified as an independent institution that is able to apply, or an independent unit, and is able to apply for National Endowment for the Arts funding separate from the larger university. All right, so let's talk about Grants.gov. And one of the things about this webinar is we're going to be spending a lot of time in a web browser window. So there's not a slide deck for this. Many of the functions that we'll be showing are modeled and have slides walking you through it in their slide decks. But for our purposes today, we'll be primarily looking at websites, and I will make sure to share links as we go along. So if you'd like to do your own searches as we're talking about this, please feel free. So the main clearinghouse for federal grant applications and for discovering federal grants is Grants.gov. Not everything is in here, but increasingly over the last 5 years, the US federal government has been trying to consolidate the process and make it more consistent. And so there are some exceptions. For example, for a lot of National Endowment for the Arts awards, you will apply first through Grants.gov and second through their separate application system. And there are some things that exist entirely outside of it, but the vast majority you will find here. And we'll explain certain concepts as we go, but we're going to start with a search. So I've noticed in the comments that there's several people who are nursing faculty persons or working in a nursing department or program. And so let's just start out and let's do a search for nursing. Now we do the search and we end up with a fair number of results coming up. Hold on. There we are. And we'll find that there's some stuff that seems a little bit more general. Okay, competitions on people, prosperity, and planet. All right, that may have nursing as an eligible field, but we start moving around and we see some things that are much more specific, such as nursing research education program in firearm injury prevention research. Rural residency planning and development, regional AIDS education and training centers, nurse faculty loan program. I'm going to take a moment and talk about this one because I was speaking with some of the organizers of this, and they said, we really wish we had more people applying for these funding and things. Uh, there is money that is not always spent in this fund. And if you hear that about an opportunity, I recommend applying for it because if you have, say, there's funding for 25 awards and they only get 24 applications, well, if you had been number 25, you're very probably going to be funded unless there's something that's just plain missing from your proposal. So let's look at this one. This is one that is run by the Health Resources and Services Administration, the HRSA. I mentioned this because there's a lot of stuff that if you are looking at funding for nursing research or nursing education, that it's probably coming from either the National Science Foundation, the Health Resources and Services Administration, or another large federal entity that deals specifically with health research, like say the Centers for Disease Control, the National Institutes of Health, etc. Now, the Health Resources and Service Administration, one of its programs is designed to increase the number of people who are working and teaching nursing. And we'll look at some of these details in a moment, but we're going to start with looking at who is eligible to apply. So private colleges and universities, nonprofits that are 501c3s. These are public colleges and universities, and a few other things like, tribal governments. So for example, I am a resident of the state of Minnesota. Now, if I was at the state of Minnesota, I might be working with, say, the University of Minnesota, which is a state-controlled institution of higher education. I might be working through my own 501c3 nonprofit. I might be working with, say, Augsburg College, which is a religious private institute of higher education located in the city of Minneapolis. I might be working with one of the tribal governments for one of the Native American reservations in, let's pick the southern part of the state. And so you can see that there are multiple umbrellas, as this is a particularly broad fund. And basically, if you are a public serving institution that is recognized by the federal government, and in some cases not, but still recognized as that type of institution, they're eligible to apply. So pretty much anywhere in the United States, including US territories, if you meet the basic requirements, your institution is eligible for this. And in this case, a requirement is it's a school of nursing that is accredited and that files all the paperwork. Now, the particular program, this is one that I've had one student apply for this and their program got it. So that's so far 100% success rate. If this is something that interests you, let's talk about the perks here. The NFLP program is designed to increase the number of qualified nursing faculty nationwide by providing low-interest loans for individuals studying to be nurse faculty and loan cancellation for those who go on to work as faculty. What's one of the major barriers that people face in deciding whether to pursue a Doctor of Nursing Practice degree or a PhD in nursing degree? Taking out loans. What's one of the things that deters them from teaching? It doesn't pay as well as working more shifts. This is designed to remove that barrier, and with the idea that we should make it very expensive, very inexpensive to be a student, and once you join the program, to make it very easy to cancel the loans. I will tell you that in my experience, and I have taught in 4 different Doctor of Nursing Practice programs, my general experience is that the average DNP student is working 50 to 60 hours per week, usually with the goal of paying off those tuition bills as soon as they come due. That is a lot of work. It is a lot of work considering that, the rest of life doesn't slow down and you also have to, study. So if you were running a program and you're looking to attract more people into the program, getting an award through this fund, through the Nurse Faculty Loan Program run by the Department of Health and Human Services, is a great way to say, hey, if you come and study through us or you come and teach through us, here's this big financial debt burden that we can make go away. We'll first make it light if you're studying and make it go away. And so there are a couple programs that are specifically designed it as a kind of combo deal. You come, you do our doctorate with us, and then you teach with us. And so not only are your loans relatively inexpensive while you're a student, but then after you've taught with us for the eligibility period, then we're able to help you get those loans forgiven. And mind you, compared to another very well-known thing, the health shortage or health resources shortage areas or HRSAs, this one is not geographically limited. There's nothing that says you must be in an area that is medically underserved. This is something that's available to nursing schools throughout the country. And that includes nursing schools that are not just offering the Doctor of Nursing practice degree, but if you're part of a faculty and you are trying to boost your undergraduate enrollment or boost your undergraduate graduation rate or time to degree. We all know that many students, one of the things that tends to slow down first generation college students in their progression is if they are working a substantial amount on the side. Usually up to 12 to 15 hours is not a huge burden on the student's time, assuming that there are not other significant obligations like, say, having children. But if they're trying to work, half-time or full-time while being a full-time student, that is the kind of thing that does not make the journey easier. And so this program can be used to ease that journey. So let's talk a little bit more about this. And again, if you are attending this webinar because you have an active interest in finding grants and applying for them, please let us know in the chat window because we're trying to keep our content focused on things that will be of most interest to you. And so if that can be done by using examples that speak to you and your needs, awesome. So let's look at the brief précis for, what are the conditions here? So this is just talking about the general intent, a geographically dispersed nurse faculty workforce. So, if all the nurses are living in Boston, Massachusetts, that's not terribly helpful for the rest of the country. Boston, I believe, still has one of the highest concentrations of medical providers per capita in the country. And while I'd still like the wait for a provider to be shorter than it is there, the rest of the country would love to be in that position of having so many providers. Here's where we start getting into the what are they looking for and what this program can do. Successful applicants establish and operate a student loan program, including maintaining a fund, providing loans to students enrolled in advanced education nursing degree programs, and monitoring compliance with program requirements. Now, we'll come back to this, what does that mean later, but I can tell you that even my local community college in Minnesota operates something that meets the definition here of a student loan program and providing loans to students. Now, here we get into something about the sort of program that this is designed to underwrite. In exchange for completion of up to 4 years of post-graduation full-time nurse faculty employment in an accredited school of nursing, graduates receive cancellation of up to 85% of the original student loan amount plus interest as authorized by the program. APRNs who serve as full-time preceptors within an advanced practice partnership framework are considered faculty under this. And so because of that, this makes the majority of advanced nursing programs eligible for it, which is a design thing. That's a feature, not a bug. So we could go ahead and click through this link here. But let's go ahead and open up some of these links. So here we have repetition of some information we saw earlier. We can see, oh, this is a program that the most current deadline is in February. That would probably be a little bit soon if you were applying now, but I can tell you this program has been running for years. So understanding that educational institutions often don't move quickly, even if this isn't something that you think you could apply for now, you can absolutely put it on the calendar for later. Now, this is a great point for us to talk about organization. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and show you one way of tracking in this information. So I have opened up here a blank grant calendar. One moment as I get that sharing working. All right, now let's say that we decide, okay, as an organization, we're interested in tracking this. And so, well, we want to get some information here. First, let's grab the link. And we'll want to label this. This is the Nurse Faculty Loan Program. And then we'll want to put in something about what month the deadline is. So in this case, our deadline here is February 5th, 2024. Now, all this is right now, it's a spreadsheet that lets us look and see, okay, where is the distribution of work? Because if you have all the deadlines in January, either you're going to be starting very early or you're going to be prioritizing. And you can put in additional details under grant radar, things you're considering, but you're not actively tracking, current grants that you have, past ones, and how to access them. Some people will use the Google Calendar. I like this because it gives you a sense of how things are clustered. And you can tag people to get emails when you have oh, you need to provide this piece of information, for example. All right, so that was a quick look at nursing. So before we go any further, let's take a look at another area where that might come up. Because nursing is a program, we have other things that might be coming up as well. So let's say you're working on trying to improve access in a number of different areas. Let's say you're working with, you have a OB-GYN program that you're training nurses to work with the doctors there, or training nurse midwives. And so you might decide, oh, that maternity care nursing workforce expansion, that sounds like something we might be interested in. So this says forecasted opportunity, meaning it's not being advertised right now as this is definitely open. But I can tell you that this particular one has been offered for the last couple of years as well. So looking at this, you can get an idea of, okay, this is also supposed to increase the workforce. We don't have the guidelines yet because it hasn't been officially launched, but we can look around and see, all right, nothing here. But you can also look at, has it been offered in the past? By when you're going to our search page, you can look at archived things. So I'm going to just undo forecast and post it here. So we're only seeing things that have been offered but aren't actively offered now. And you can see there's a wide selection of nursing things here, or things that overlap with nursing. And there's a lot in there, including international programs, things like mental illness, education for international programs, disease control. A surprising amount of that goes through schools. In this case, post-secondary education, so that's college level stuff, if we were to search for primary school, secondary, a school, and things like that, we would find other things appropriate to that level. Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to turn away from nursing and we are going to look at something else. And so just glancing at the opportunities that people have described in the chat, we can see that we have STEM as being one of the interests here. So with acronyms, it's often helpful to spell out the whole thing, but let's just start out by searching for that term here. And just as a note, sometimes the Grants.gov page needs to be reloaded for your search to go through. It's one of those quirks. But you can see that I searched and the number of options there changed, and we see looking for STEM, which is again more restrictive, we have a variety of things coming up. National Science Foundation, this is more basic science research. NSF scholarships, Navy training program, NASA, international research experiences for students. So you can see this is going in a number of different ways. And so probably the next step we want to do, if this was an interest of yours, is to go look and see, all right, what more specific thing? Are you looking at getting funding that will let you underwrite scholarships, that will let you start a program that prepares people for college? And these are all things where there's no one right answer right now. We're just at this very moment looking to pick a focus for our searching. And so let's say we go through and we say, let's start with this research experiences for undergraduates. So if we open that up, we see this is a National Science Foundation opportunity. It encompasses a wide body of program sizes, because 5,000, you might run, a weekend workshop on that budget. 500,000, that's a much larger program or a much longer one. So if we look at the description here, we see that we're going to need someone to be the principal investigator or PI of record. And we're looking here for, to underwrite a program that's going to pay students in any of the areas of research funded by the National Science Foundation. That is wonderfully broad. That means that there's a whole slew of different things that they're saying, we're willing to consider this. And when you are looking at this, we have, in this particular case, this is designed to serve people who are full-time permanent residents of the United States or US citizens. And this is specifically institution, usually a school, would apply for funding and propose a program that would be underwritten by that. Now, in this case, we can see the application is far off. Is this something that you could use for medical, nursing, healthcare research? Oh yeah, this is a very broad umbrella that they are operating under, especially because a lot of those interact with integrative activities and things like behavioral and biological sciences. So let's say we were adding this one here. So I'm going to grab the link here, and I'm going to add it to my spreadsheet. And see, this is research experiences for undergrads. And then I'm looking at my due date here and seeing, oh, August 21st. Awesome. I've got lots of time to prepare this. And you can add other information on this later, like, well, what is it asking for? But let's poke around a little bit here and see what we can find. So this package here is giving us an idea of what this form is actually going to be asking for. So we're going to go ahead and we can see that there's a bit of paperwork. This is a standard form for applying for federal funds. We can see that it'll show you all the fields. Okay, this stuff is not terribly too time consuming to collect. And then we start to get questions like, who is going to be supervising this? The project director, principal investigator, which can be the person who's writing the application, often is not. Often you will present the resume or CV of that person. And so part of what you're doing is showing that they have the appropriate experience to be able to manage this well, in part by past projects. Authorized person is the person who is signing this or who will be fulfilling this. And we can see, oh, there's a standard page for identifying how this person is qualified, including having their biographical sketch and a list of anyone else who's going to be, say, teaching in this program or advising. And we have a description of where is this, which would probably be your college or university. And here's a very interesting one, suggested reviewers. This is one of those things that often throws people for a loop when they are applying for the first award like this, because the idea that you suggest people who would be a good reviewer, that's actually fairly common in Europe, and it tends to be more of a discipline-specific thing in the United States. But if you know someone who is doing this kind of program already, who was, say, a graduate school colleague of yours, worked with you at another institution, ran a program like this before, and you check in with them and they say, oh yeah, I'd be happy to review that, then you can list them and suggest, hey, I think this person is qualified to evaluate our stuff here. And then, of course, there's a description of the project, which will probably be in proportion to how much money you're asking for. Now, we are going to take a moment to also look at this particular one here, the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program, because I've had one student in the past who was actually doing a program similar to this. So we can see that this is for essentially a US college or a few types of nonprofits. And it requires that you have a team that includes someone with an advanced STEM degree who's in a STEM department. And here's the big one, someone from an education department. So if you have one person who is, say, a doctor of education program faculty person, and someone who is a, let's say, math faculty, and you are collaborating to create a STEM research umbrella, awesome. This is something where you'll be engaging as equals, or as you prepare this proposal, and the goal is, in the end, to train more STEM teachers. Now, that's a high need thing in almost all of the United States. So it's a good sell, like if you're planning on becoming a public educator, a STEM field is probably as good a guarantee as you might say for employment. And this is also something where this scholarship program is about obtaining money to underwrite people's study. And we see that it's actually a relatively short window of eligibility required to get the scholarship. So 2 years per year of scholarship support. Oh, great. If you do a master's in 2 years, well, 4 years of teaching, that's pretty close to the average tenure for a first-time teacher at a single institution before they're either promoted or moved to another district. And we have certain opportunities with master teaching fellowships that are developing people for particularly high need districts. And so there's a wide variety of options, including this particular one that I really want to call your attention to, capacity building. So not all of these grants need to be for something that you are specifically trying to do right now. This is a specific part because they've recognized, hey, there's a big pipeline problem. We would like to have more teachers than are coming in now, and that your school or your nonprofit might not be ready to do this program this year. But you can apply for capacity building funding to give you good bit of time. Like $100,000 buys a fair bit of staff time to work on a full application to do a big program, to actually have something that is training teachers. And so make sure you look for things like this, because you might say, oh, this is wonderful, but I don't think I can get the whole thing together in a year. Well, this award is something that will let you get funded to take a year to work on planning everything out in detail, getting everyone on board, getting the room reservation and stuff, and then be able to apply for full funding. So that is an important term to look for: capacity building, especially if you are in what I would call a under-resourced nonprofit, which in my experience is the vast majority of nonprofits. Nonprofits have a lot of people who are wearing a lot of hats and are being asked to do a lot of work. So let's just do a search now for capacity building and see what comes up. And we're going to use this in part as a means to talk about using the filters on the left. So we see, in Senegal, in Nigeria, maybe some of those are a little bit outside of where we are interested in. Ukraine law enforcement and justice sector, that might not be where people want to be working at this very moment, because they are, not wanting to go into war zone, or that international part is not something that they're interested in right now. But you can see here under categories, we can sort and see how we're going to narrow this down. So let's say you're interested in capacity building and in education format. So we could go and check education. We might also go ahead and look at this and say, let's align this with our institution and say, okay, I am at let's take ACU as an example. That would be considered a private institution of higher education. So we'll hit that checkbox. And now the number of results that are showing up for us right now are a much more manageable list to look at. And you can see, oh, hey, here's some interesting stuff. Watershed programming specifically for a school district. So if you were looking for something to fund programming that would take place in your district, here's something from the national, the national oceanography, forget the first A is, and administration. So NOAA. And so this is the kind of thing where you might have a district designing its own program, or you might have an entity, which in this case could include, I believe, a state education department or a school district level umbrella, applying for funds to run things for their whole district. You see, independent school districts as well as a county could apply. So this is something where you could do a smaller application just to run things at your school, a little larger to run it for the whole district, or if you were working in a Department of Education of some sort, to do a larger thing. Now, within this larger umbrella, we see, what are they looking for? So learning both outdoors and in the classroom, some specific tasks, all of which are great things for K-12 students to be learning, and to increase understanding and stewardship of this particular geography and aspects of that. Okay, great. And within that, they have two different streams of which they're delineating the funding. Awesome. Let's go back and we're going to take a look at the particular things we've got checked already here. So this is the eligibility here, and we're going to set that back to all eligibilities. And you'll see that we have a broader set of things, including things for overseas. And we want to make this more domestic. So we're now going to look at the agencies here. And you can see that there's a number for how many different opportunities are under each particular thing. And we're going to go ahead and say, you know what? We are going to be doing a targeted search here. We are really interested in the Department of Education. What are they funding? So we're going to check that box. We're only going to see things from the Department of Education. You might be asking, hold on, why aren't I seeing all the other things? Why am I only seeing one? Well, first we have capacity building check as our keyword here. And then we also have the delimitation to organization type. So if in doubt, you can go ahead and we can do a fresh search from start. So I'm just reloading that search grants page. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick that institution, Department of Education. And now I can see the larger selection of programs here. So, service for children with disabilities. Awesome. I can think of a couple ACU students who are working on that right now. Educational technology and media for that. Oh, great. Special education for Native American communities. Research, Alaska. Migrants. Oh, that's a growing one today. We have, some districts that have been transformed by more recent influx of young families into their district. And, there's one thing that's for sure in education is that there's always things changing because society is changing. We have more things about higher level research, if you will. Particular program, Race to the Top. Race to the Top is still going on. So let's say that you look at this and you say, all right, those are great, but I remember seeing some other opportunities other than just the Department of Education. So we're going to broaden this, and we're going to, by deselecting the Department of Education, and we're just going to search for the keyword education. And you see we have 36 pages of results here. So there's a lot of stuff there. We probably want to do some other things to limit that, such as, in this case, we'll go to select private institutions of higher education. We still have 276 results. So there's a lot of stuff here. Let's go ahead and see what would happen if we put in Texas, just to see. So there was a suggestion in the chat that we do a search for some topics, and you'll see that I'm not coming up with anything when I search that. But remember, I've got a bunch of check boxes is here. So if I went and reset this, if I just started from scratch on this, and now I go ahead and type in suicide prevention in quotation marks. Now we have some results. Now, I think we should be getting more than that. So just like if you are doing a search in one of our research databases and you find, I know there's more out there than that, I just can't find it. One of the things that our library staff would do with you is they would try different things, including, in this case, taking the quotation marks off. And we search for those two, and now we're back in the hundreds of results here. So that's a dramatic difference from just a small change in how we are wording that search. Now, in terms of what you might be doing, we're going to look at this HHS opportunity here. So this is in preparation for substance use prevention trials. This is more like you're planning on doing a big study kind of thing. But also, if we were looking at something more particular, if you're not aware, the Ryan White program, there are Ryan White centers in every U.S. state that provide healthcare and healthcare-related services for people living with HIV and AIDS. And it was named after a person who got HIV from a blood transfusion, and because they were living in the era before HIV/AIDS drugs were available and as effective as they are now, they passed away from it. So that's something where suicide prevention is absolutely one of the things that they fund, because living with a chronic disease, and particularly one like HIV, AIDS, is something that it dramatically increases your risk of suicide. Now, we're going to try something else with the search string here before we move on. And so if we were to put in youth, I bet we're not going to get all the things we want, but let's do a search. So that's broadened it in some ways, but youth is kind of broad. If we search for teen, that narrows it down a little bit more. And so this is something where I would want to spend, probably half an hour to an hour working with someone else sitting with you to just brainstorm different ways to word things. And there are places where you might go into public library and ask one of the libraries to help you with librarians to help you with that. When I was on the faculty at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, in the library, we'd have people come in, and because it's a public serving institution, they would come in with research, things like that, and we just help them out at the desk. So just be aware that how you word that and how the particular announcement is worded may make it seem like the thing that you're looking for is not there. But I can promise you with this topic, there is a lot of funding, and it's an important thing. And if that's something you're interested in, please feel free to come to the Writing Center for help with some of the grant writing, because it's an important cause. All right, another topic that came up that also is one that you might not find as much as you know is out there if you just put it in verbatim: teens at risk. And this is something there are lots of different synonyms for. And if we just look through this, we'd find, oh, Education USA advising services, teens in Kazakhstan, sure. But I think for right now, we're talking about in the United States. So you might decide to limit this, by agency. You might pick limited by organization, for the organization that you are representing or would be representing in an application. And in our case, let's go ahead and we're actually going to select individuals. So you might be wondering, why are all these things coming up here? Well, because the term risk, everyone wants to be meeting a need, and mitigating risk or addressing things at risk means that risk is actually a really common term and all sorts of things that don't have anything to do with teens, except that that fund or some aspects of that fund can be used to serve audiences that include teens. So one of the things we might try to do is to find how can we word that in a different way. And just as a heads up, we have about 2 more minutes on this before we need to turn to the last item on our discussion list for today. So as we are doing that, please sneak in your questions if you have any more about what we're talking about so far. So let's say we are looking at, let's put in the words urban and risk and see what comes up with that. We've got a lot of international stuff here. Okay, great. Asian elephants, great. Probably not what you're applying for right now if you're in, say, our EDD program or DNP. And so we want to make our search more specific. So again, we'll try here. Let's select the category of education. That's giving us more things that are either international, environmental, or basic science research, or actually medical research in that case. So not quite what we want. Now, another way we could do this is to do a search somewhere else and try and find the name of a program and see what it's coded for. So let's just do a open Google search. And it's a perfectly legitimate activity to get an idea of how is this being described? So go ahead and type in the chat room some keywords that you think might be helpful to look for. We want to find a federal program that would fund things to reduce risk for teens. And just what would you start searching for? And while you're typing in the chat room, I'm going to go ahead and run a search or two. So I just went and searched for federal funds for teens at risk, and we see a number of different things that are coming up already. And you know what? I'm actually going to take a look at this one here. So this is a program through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is not probably what came to your mind first thing when you're thinking about at-risk programs, but we have this acronym SIFAR. So this is specifically going to land-grant universities. So most of the land-grant universities in the country are located west of the Appalachians. It's not a universal thing, but that particular structure of a land-grant university where it was set up with a huge amount of land that was designed to support the operations. You know, they're big schools like, say, the University of Wisconsin is a land-grant institution. And that has really defined the character of what some of its programs are, because it's starting with this, uses of the land to support it. And so the agriculture program at that school is really well developed. The forestry program is really well developed, so on and so forth. So what if we took that acronym and plugged it in here? Well, we've still got a bunch of restrictions on here, so let's go ahead and open that up. Still not seeing what I want. And then we see, there's the program. Let's take a look. So community projects, the minimum award is 80,000. Maximum award is 160,000. So let's keep our ideas within that budgetary range. And for our eligibility, it is particular to land-grant universities, but I would not have expected the University of the District of Columbia to be in there. That happens to be probably one that could put a lot to use, because there's a definite need for youth engagement in the area that it serves. And I can tell you that statistically speaking, many of their students have families with children. And so there's both in your own backyard and in the broader neighborhood that you're embedded in. Okay, so because this is a program that has been running for some time, and you can see that it was updated, that our next deadline is February 15th. And this is one that's been running annually. So if not this year, you can prepare for next year. What if you went looking for some examples of what's going on? And we'd see, all right, here's the announcement. We could download that with all the forms and such. But I want to know SIFAR programs. Now, because we found that very specific acronym, it's easy now for us to find instances of this. We can find the documentation on the USDA webpage. We can see a list of some program types that have been funded, and even ballpark, okay, 60 to 70 families annually for one program. And if that's happening within the budget of $160,000. Now, let's take a look here at what this particular thing, and I did not know this when I clicked on it, but it's the University of Minnesota, so in my backyard, and let's see what they have to say here. Oh, hey, this is a really nice project list. And, I have family in Hawaii. I was in Hawaii over winter break. Let's go take a look at this program here. Creating a village for a transition to adulthood through youth-adult partnerships, team mentoring, and community sustainability. 4-part format, skills mastery, and in life skills. And they even say in their description, and this is the description they submitted when they applied for it, that there was a growing demand for the community and incorporates this specific school's expertise in that area. That's a great thing to have in your grant description. It says, hey, the community's been asking for it. And hey, we have a college that is doing this thing that has expertise in it. Second part, mentorship by teens following a plan that was already designed. Adult youth partnerships, so they're bringing in outside expertise, and this kind of thing is a volunteer program. So that's one of the reasons they were able to do this under the grant ceiling. So this shows that they have a means of controlling the personnel costs. And they're specifically saying, hey, to make sure that this works, we're going to compare no fee with a sliding fee, a program afterwards. And so we're not just getting this grant to make something happen, we're also trying to figure out how to make it happen best. Now, if you're curious, if we look through this, we'd find some instances where it's basically the same program. We're doing that thing that someone else is doing it in another site. And look no further than something that has the same name, Juntos, as to find an example of that. So do you need to write a whole new application? No. I will tell you my experience in the grant writing world for public grants like this. I have written people who I knew were the applicant of record or the contact, like in this case, you see them listed here, and said, I'm preparing to apply for this thing in a different part of the world or a different part of the country. Could I possibly see part of your application narrative just to see what was successful? And they've just gone ahead and sent a copy to me. So if you think it's a lot of work, uh, everything is easier when you have a good example. And again, they are working with applying things that they already have, like the 4-H Ready to Go Mentor Training Toolkit. That is used in many different states. And so you're not really competing with the people in Idaho if you do a parallel program in Indiana. And then you can both say, hey, we're a leading program being used at multiple national sites, which is a great way of attracting people to show a history of success and excellence. And remember, we're talking about 4-H stuff here. Well, you can see that there are multiple 4-H programs that are using elements of this elsewhere. So you might say, okay, well, that's great, but my institution is a little bit far from anything farming related. So we're going to take that model, but we're not going to do it in a rural setting. We're going to adapt this part. And you get some really nice things here. And you can see here there's a hybrid program that's split between Oklahoma and West Virginia, where this program has expanded to also have an entrepreneurship component. Actually, one of my students worked on this here, the Sustainable Community Project through the University of Tennessee Extension School. All right, we are very close to the hour, so let me talk about a couple things before we wrap up. In order to apply for federal funds through Grants.gov, if you're an individual, then you will need your social security number or EIN. And if you're applying as a nonprofit, you will need the employer identification number, that's EIN, which is just same thing that we use for tax and annual filings for your nonprofit. And you're also going to need something called the SAM or SAM number. And this is basically a code that the federal government uses as technically, we're talking about the unique entity ID. When applying for federal funds, this is the thing that usually takes the longest for people to get after their IRS 501c3 approval letter. It's not a hard problem, but often people will look at the form and say, oh, well, I'm going to do that later, because it's asking for a lot of information and you need to wait for one thing to be approved to get the other. I would budget about a month to get a unique entity ID approved if your nonprofit doesn't have one already. Once you get it, you can renew it every year. And when you are applying for it the first time, you can check to see if your organization already has it. So in this case, you can actually search in their database. And so if you are at a university, you almost certainly have that assigned, and you just need to get that number from the database and then find out, is there someone whose office you need to be working through? So usually this is called the Office of Research or the Office of Sponsored Programs. Let's just do a quick Google search for ACU. So if we search for ACU sponsored programs, we come up with the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. And so for external funding, which is what we're talking about for working with the federal government, we have a guide here. And essentially, they can set things up so you prepare a draft that will go in through Grants.gov, but they will do the final inputting some institution-specific information, and they will submit the actual application because they are authorized by the university to sign on the university's behalf, because a grant is a contract. Really quick, because we're just past the hour, I saw an excellent comment in the chat that it is important to follow grant details. Yes, absolutely. It's not that you can't ever change things after an award is made. During the pandemic, there are a lot of things where the implementation details were updated, but that's another layer of communication. And so if you can get things right the first time and make it clear that you are following the letter of the grant guidelines, it just makes everything more clear. So we do go into that in some of the other webinars, but let's basically tie things home. First, if you have any questions about this, please feel free to send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. We are happy to work with students on grant applications. I am really proud to say that while I have managed to get some number of hundreds of thousands of grants for programs in my time writing grants, that my students have done better than I. And so if we look at what they've gotten, we're talking numbers in the millions. And that just makes me proud because there are so many people doing great work and great research. And if we can be helpful for you on your journey, happy to do that. So with that, I need to let you return to the rest of your day. Thank you for joining us, and I'll catch you soon.